The first fine appeared on my windshield at 6:30 in the morning, and I knew right then that my new HOA president was going to be a problem. I had just gotten home from a 14-hour shift clearing Interstate 70 through the Rocky Mountains west of Denver, and my snowplow truck sat in my driveway where it always did, covered in road salt and ice. The temperature was hovering around 8 degrees. My back ached from sitting in that cab all night, and all I wanted was to stumble inside my house in Lakewood, Colorado, and pass out for a few hours before my next shift. Instead, I found a bright orange citation tucked under my wiper blade, the paper already starting to freeze stiff in the cold. Violation of HOA Covenant Section 14.2. Commercial vehicle parking prohibited on residential property between hours of 10 p.m. and 6 a.m. Fine, $250. I stood there in my driveway, still wearing my highway department jacket with the Colorado Department of Transportation logo on the back, and read the thing 3 times. My brain was too tired to process what I was seeing. I had lived in Pine Valley Estates for 8 years. I had parked my state-issued snowplow in this exact spot for 8 years. Nobody had ever said a word about it. I crumpled the citation in my fist and headed inside. I would deal with this after I got some sleep. The phone call woke me up 4 hours later. I fumbled for my cell phone on the nightstand, squinting at the bright screen. Unknown number. I almost declined it, but something made me answer. "Hello, is this Xavier Emerson?" A woman's voice, sharp and officious. "Yeah, who's this?" "This is Wendy Klein, president of the Pine Valley Estates Homeowners Association. I'm calling about the citation you received this morning." I sat up in bed, running a hand through my hair. "Look, I just got to sleep. Can this wait?" "No, actually, it cannot wait. I noticed you haven't paid the fine yet, and I wanted to make sure you understand that we're very serious about enforcement of our community standards." Community standards. I was trying hard not to lose my temper. I've parked that truck in my driveway for 8 years. Well, things are different now. I was elected president 3 months ago, and one of my primary campaign promises was to restore order and property values to this neighborhood. That means enforcing rules that have been allowed to slide for far too long. I took a deep breath. "Mrs. Klein, that truck is how I get to work. I drive snowplow for CDOT. I'm on call during winter storms, which means I need to have my vehicle readily available. Then I suggest you find somewhere else to park it, perhaps a storage facility, but it cannot remain on your property overnight. The covenant is very clear about commercial vehicles. It's not a commercial vehicle, it's a state vehicle. A commercial truck is defined as any vehicle over 10,000 pounds or any vehicle displaying commercial markings or equipment. Your snowplow clearly qualifies on both counts." "You've got to be kidding me." "I assure you, Mr. Emerson, I am completely serious. You have until 5 p.m. today to pay the fine or it will double, and if I see that truck in your driveway tonight, you'll receive another citation. Good day." She hung up before I could respond. I sat there staring at my phone, my exhaustion replaced by a growing anger. I had just spent all night keeping the roads safe so people could get to work, so emergency vehicles could get through, so this entire city could function during a snowstorm. And this was the thanks I got. I got dressed and made coffee, then pulled out my copy of the HOA Covenant. I had received it when I bought the house, but had never actually read the whole thing. It was 60 pages of dense legal text, and it took me an hour to find section 14.2. Wendy Klein was technically right. The language about commercial vehicles was there in black and white. But there was also a clause about exceptions for emergency services and essential workers. I had to read it twice to make sure I understood it correctly. Exceptions to vehicle restrictions may be granted for law enforcement, fire service, emergency medical services, or other critical infrastructure positions, at the sole discretion of the HOA board. At the sole discretion of the HOA board, which now meant at the sole discretion of Wendy Klein. I checked the time. It was just past noon. I had another shift starting at 6 p.m., which meant I needed to leave by 5:30 to get to the CDOT yard. I threw on a clean shirt and drove to the address listed as the HOA office, which turned out to be a small office suite in a strip mall about 2 miles away. Wendy Klein looked exactly like I had pictured her. Mid-40s, blonde hair cut in that specific angular style that seemed to be standard issue for HOA presidents, designer glasses, and an expression like she had just smelled something unpleasant. She sat behind a desk with a nameplate that read HOA President in gold letters. Mr. Emerson. I didn't expect to see you in person. I wanted to talk to you about the citation and about the exception clause in Section 14.2. Her expression didn't change. I'm aware of the exception clause. Then you know that snowplow operators qualify as critical infrastructure workers. I keep the highways clear during storms. That's pretty essential. The exception is for emergency services, police, fire, ambulance. You're a maintenance worker. A maintenance worker. I felt my face getting hot. Lady, when there's 2 feet of snow on I-70 and cars are sliding off into ditches, I'm the one out there making sure people don't die. I work directly with state troopers and emergency services. I've pulled people out of wrecked cars. I've cleared paths for ambulances. Don't tell me I'm just a maintenance worker. Your personal feelings about your job don't change the covenant language, Mr. Emerson. The exception is for emergency response vehicles, not maintenance vehicles. If you'd like to apply for a special exception, you can submit a written request to the board, and we'll consider it at our next quarterly meeting. Quarterly meeting? When's that? March 15th. That's 3 months away. What am I supposed to do until then? Follow the rules like everyone else. Park your truck off property between 10 p.m. and 6 a.m. I'm on call 24/7 during snow season. I get calls at 2 in the morning to respond to storms. I can't have my truck 15 minutes away in some storage lot. Wendy folded her hands on her desk. That sounds like a personal problem, Mr. Emerson. Now, if you'll excuse me, I have other appointments. Your fine is still due by 5 p.m. today. I left the office before I said something I would regret. I sat in my personal truck in the parking lot and called my supervisor at CDOT. Ray answered on the second ring. Xavier, what's up? You're not calling in sick, are you? We've got another storm coming tonight. No, I'll be there, but I've got a problem. My HOA is trying to fine me for parking the plow in my driveway overnight. There was a long pause. You're joking. I wish I was. Can they do that? Apparently they can. The new HOA president is on some kind of power trip. She says I can apply for an exception, but the next board meeting isn't until March. Ray swore quietly. Look, I can write you a letter explaining that you're an essential state employee and you need immediate access to your vehicle. Maybe that'll help. Can you have it to me by tonight? I'll do it right now and email it to you. Print it out and give it to her. If she's got any sense, she'll back off. Ray was a good supervisor, and he had the letter to me within an hour. It was written on official CDOT letterhead and explained in formal language that I was a critical winter maintenance employee, responsible for keeping major highways clear during severe weather events. It noted that my response time was essential for public safety, and that delayed access to my assigned vehicle could result in dangerous road conditions and risk to motorists. I printed 2 copies, drove back to the HOA office, and left one in Wendy Klein's mailbox since she was no longer there. Then I took a picture of the letter and the citation and posted it to the Pine Valley Estates community Facebook group with a simple caption. HOA trying to fine me for parking my state snowplow at home. I'm the guy who keeps the roads clear so you can get to work. Thought you should know. The response was immediate and overwhelming. Within an hour, I had over 200 comments, most of them from neighbors outraged on my behalf. Several people tagged Wendy Klein directly. Others shared their own stories of what they considered unfair HOA enforcement under the new administration. My phone buzzed with a text from a neighbor I barely knew, a guy named Marcus who lived 3 streets over. "Dude, I'm on the HOA board. I had no idea Wendy was doing this. This is not cool. Hang in there." Another text came from Wendy Klein. "Your social media stunt is highly inappropriate and will be addressed. Your fine is now $500 for failure to pay by deadline. Another citation will be issued if truck is not removed by 10 p.m. I started to type an angry response, then deleted it. I needed to stay professional. Instead, I forwarded her text to Ray and asked him if the state had any legal resources for employees dealing with this kind of situation. At 5:30, I drove to the CDOT yard in my personal truck, got in the snowplow, and headed out for my shift. The storm hit around 8 p.m., and I spent the next 12 hours running the same loop on I-70, pushing snow, salting the road, helping stranded motorists, and coordinating with state troopers. Around 3 in the morning, we got a call about a jackknifed semi near Georgetown. I was the closest plow, so I helped the troopers block traffic and clear a path for the tow truck. By the time we got the road open again, it was nearly 5 a.m. I drove home exhausted, my eyes burning from staring at falling snow all night. I pulled into my driveway at 6:15 a.m., intentionally waiting until after the 6 a.m. cutoff time in the HOA covenant. There was already a citation on my windshield. Violation of HOA Covenant Section 14.2. Commercial vehicle parking prohibited on residential property between hours of 10 p.m. and 6 a.m. Fine, $500. Note, this is your second violation. Third violation will result in towing at owner's expense and hearing before the HOA board for potential additional sanctions. I stood in my driveway holding the citation, so angry I was shaking. I had been home for 15 minutes. She must have been watching my house, waiting for me to get back. I took a picture of the citation with a timestamp visible on my truck's dashboard clock showing 6:11 a.m., then posted it to the Facebook group. Cited again, despite being home after 6 a.m. HOA president must have been watching my house waiting for me to return from keeping I-70 clear all night. This is harassment. This time, the response was even bigger. People were furious. Several neighbors offered to let me park in their driveways. Others suggested organizing a petition to recall Wendy Klein. Someone started a GoFundMe to help pay my fines, and it raised $3,000 in 4 hours before I asked them to shut it down. Marcus called me directly. "Xavier, I'm so sorry about this. I talked to the other board members and we had no idea Wendy was being this aggressive. We're calling an emergency board meeting for tomorrow night. Can you come? I've got a shift tomorrow night, another storm coming through." "What time do you start?" 6 p.m. "We'll do it at 5, that work?" "Yeah, I can do that, good." And listen, between you and me, Wendy's got some personal issues going on. Her husband left her about 6 months ago, and I think she's taking it out on everyone else. That doesn't excuse what she's doing, but it might explain it. I don't really care about her personal life, Marcus. I just want to park my truck in my own driveway without getting harassed. I get it. We'll fix this tomorrow. The next morning, I woke up to find my truck had been vandalized. Someone had spray painted "Move your truck" across the side in bright red letters. My doorbell camera had caught footage of a figure in dark clothes doing it around 4 in the morning, but the video quality wasn't good enough to make out who it was. I filed a police report. The officer who took the statement was sympathetic, but realistic. Without a clear image of the person, there's not much we can do. Could be random vandalism, or it could be related to your HOA dispute. You might want to install better cameras. I had to take the plow back to the CDOT yard to get it repainted, which meant filling out incident reports and explaining the whole situation to my supervisor again. Ray was increasingly annoyed on my behalf. "This is insane. You're doing critical work for the state and you're getting treated like a criminal. Have you talked to a lawyer?" "Not yet. There's a board meeting tonight. Hopefully they'll fix it. And if they don't, then yeah, I'll get a lawyer." The emergency board meeting was held in the community center at Pine Valley Estates. I arrived at 5 p.m. to find the parking lot packed with cars, and at least 50 of my neighbors crowded into the meeting room. Apparently word had spread, and people wanted to see what would happen. The board consisted of 5 people: Wendy Klein as president, Marcus Chen as vice president, a woman named Patricia Hoffman as treasurer, and 2 other members I didn't know well. They sat at a table at the front of the room while everyone else took seats in folding chairs. Wendy called the meeting to order with a sharp rap of a gavel. "This emergency meeting of the Pine Valley Estates HOA board has been called to discuss recent enforcement matters. Before we begin, I want to remind everyone that board meetings are for board business, not public forums. We'll hear from Mr. Emerson, then the board will deliberate and vote." Marcus leaned forward. "Wendy, given the number of residents here, I think we should allow public comment. That's not standard procedure. Neither is calling an emergency meeting, but here we are. I'm making a motion to allow public comment after Xavier speaks." Patricia seconded it, and the vote passed 4-1 with only Wendy voting against it. Wendy's lips pressed into a thin line. "Fine. Mr. Emerson, you have the floor." I stood up, suddenly aware of everyone watching me. I wasn't great at public speaking, but I was too tired and too angry to be nervous. I've lived in this community for 8 years. I've been parking my state snowplow in my driveway for 8 years. Nobody ever had a problem with it before because it's not a problem. I don't run a business out of my house. I'm not operating heavy equipment at all hours. I'm a state employee who needs access to my assigned vehicle so I can do my job, which is keeping the highways safe during winter storms. I pulled out copies of Ray's letter and distributed them to the board members. My supervisor at CDOT wrote this letter explaining why immediate access to my vehicle is essential for public safety. I'm on call 24/7 during snow season. When there's a storm, I need to be able to get on the road immediately. That's not possible if my truck is in a storage lot across town. Wendy barely glanced at the letter. "This doesn't change the covenant language." "Actually, it does," Marcus said. He had his own copy of the covenant open in front of him. Section 14.2 includes exceptions for critical infrastructure workers. Xavier clearly qualifies. That's a matter of interpretation. No, it's really not. Marcus looked around at the other board members. Xavier literally keeps the roads open during snowstorms. He works directly with emergency services. If that's not critical infrastructure, I don't know what is. Patricia nodded. "I agree. And frankly, Wendy, I'm concerned about how you've handled this. Issuing citations before 6 a.m. when the covenant clearly states 6 a.m. as the cutoff time. That's not enforcement, that's harassment." I issued the citation at 6:30 a.m. based on when I observed the vehicle, which had clearly been there all night. You observed it. A neighbor in the front row stood up. So you were watching his house? Wendy's face flushed. I happened to be driving by. At 6:30 in the morning, on a street that's not on the way to anywhere, the room erupted in overlapping conversations. People were angry. Several other neighbors stood up to share their own stories of what they felt were unfair citations and fines under Wendy's administration. One woman had been fined for having her trash cans visible from the street 10 minutes before the collection window opened. Another had been cited for a lawn ornament that Wendy deemed inappropriate, even though it had been there for years. Marcus had to use the gavel to restore order. Okay, everyone, let's stay focused. We're here to address Xavier's situation specifically, but I hear your concerns, and I think the board needs to take a broader look at our enforcement policies. For now, I'm making a motion to grant Xavier a permanent exception under Section 14.2 for parking his state snowplow on his property. I second that, Patricia said immediately. The vote was 4 in favor, 1 opposed. Wendy was the only no vote. Marcus looked at me. Xavier, the exception is granted. You can park your truck at home. All existing fines are waived. And Wendy, you'll issue a formal letter to that effect by tomorrow morning. Wendy stood up abruptly, her chair scraping loudly on the floor. This is a mistake. We have rules for a reason. Property values will suffer if we let people turn their driveways into commercial parking lots. It's one truck, Patricia said. One truck that serves the entire community by keeping our roads safe. I think we can handle that. Wendy gathered her papers and left without another word. The meeting continued for another 20 minutes as other residents voiced concerns about HOA policies, and Marcus promised to schedule a full board review of enforcement procedures. I thought that was the end of it. I was wrong. 2 days later, I got a certified letter from an attorney. Wendy Klein had filed a lawsuit against me personally, claiming that my snowplow constituted a nuisance and that its presence on my property had decreased her property value. She was suing for $25,000 in damages plus legal fees. I sat at my kitchen table reading the lawsuit in disbelief. The document was 10 pages of legal jargon, but the basic argument was that my truck was ugly, loud, and inappropriate for a residential neighborhood, and that its presence had made her home harder to sell. She claimed she had been trying to sell her house for 2 months, and that several potential buyers had walked away specifically because of my truck. The lawsuit also named the HOA itself as a defendant, arguing that the board's vote to grant me an exception had been improper and exceeded their authority. I called Marcus immediately. Did you see this? Just got served an hour ago. Our HOA attorney is reviewing it now. Xavier, I'm so sorry. This is crazy. Can she actually do this? Anyone can file a lawsuit. Doesn't mean she'll win. Our attorney thinks it's frivolous, but we still have to respond to it. The HOA's insurance should cover the defense, and it should cover you too since you were acting in accordance with the board's decision. Should. I'm 99% sure. Let me confirm and get back to you. I had to work that night. Another storm moving through. I tried to focus on the road, but my mind kept drifting to the lawsuit. I had never been sued before. I had no idea what to expect or what it might cost me. Around midnight, my phone rang. It was a number I didn't recognize, but it was local, so I answered. Xavier Emerson? Yeah. This is Detective Sarah Chen with the Lakewood Police Department. We met briefly when you filed the vandalism report about your truck. Do you have a few minutes to talk? I'm working right now, but yeah, I can talk. Did you find who did it? Actually, that's why I'm calling. We got an anonymous tip that led us to review some additional security footage from a neighbor's camera. We have a clear image of the person who vandalized your truck. It was Wendy Klein. I nearly drove off the road. What? The footage shows her walking up your driveway around 4 a.m. with a spray paint can. She tried to disguise herself, but the image is clear enough for positive identification. We're going to arrest her tomorrow morning for criminal mischief and trespassing. I wanted to give you a heads up. Wow, okay, thank you. There's something else. When we started looking into Mrs. Klein's background, we found some concerning financial irregularities with the HOA accounts. I can't go into details, but I'd recommend having your board conduct a thorough audit. You might want to contact a forensic accountant. My hands were shaking on the steering wheel. Are you saying she was stealing from the HOA? I'm saying you should conduct an audit. We're opening our own investigation, but that'll take time. A private audit will be faster and give your board the information you need to take action. The detective gave me her direct number and told me to call if I had any questions or concerns. After we hung up, I immediately called Marcus and relayed everything. He was silent for a long moment. I knew something was off. She's been very controlling about the finances, wouldn't let Patricia see the detailed reports. Patricia's the treasurer, for crying out loud. She should have access to everything. What do we do? Emergency board meeting tomorrow night. I'll get an accountant lined up. And Xavier, don't worry about the lawsuit. If she's getting arrested for vandalism and potentially embezzlement, that lawsuit is going away real fast. Wendy Klein was arrested the next morning at her home. The story made the local news by noon. HOA president arrested for vandalism in dispute with snowplow operator. The news segment included footage of my truck with the spray paint, an interview with me explaining the situation, and a comment from the Lakewood Police Department confirming the arrest and ongoing investigation into HOA financial matters. The reporter, a young woman with sharp eyes and sharper questions, seemed particularly interested in the broader story. So let me make sure I understand this correctly. You keep the highways clear during snowstorms, ensuring public safety, and your HOA president responded by harassing you, vandalizing your truck, and possibly stealing money from your entire community. That's what it looks like, yeah. And she sued you for $25,000. That lawsuit was filed 2 days ago, yes. The reporter turned to the camera. This is a developing story, and we'll continue to follow it as more information becomes available. But it raises serious questions about HOA governance and accountability. Back to you in the studio. My phone exploded with calls and messages. Neighbors I had never spoken to reached out to express support. The local newspaper wanted an interview. The state representative for our district called to say she was appalled by the situation and was looking into legislative options to protect essential workers from HOA overreach. The emergency board meeting that night was packed even fuller than the last one. The board hired a forensic accountant who had spent all day reviewing HOA financial records, and what she found was staggering. Patricia read the preliminary report to the crowded room, her voice shaking with anger. Over the past 3 months since taking office, Wendy Klein has diverted approximately $60,000 from HOA accounts into her personal accounts. The transactions were disguised as payments to vendors for community maintenance and improvements, but those vendors don't exist. The checks were made out to shell companies that she controlled. The room erupted. People were shouting, demanding to know how this had happened, why nobody had noticed, what would happen to their money. Marcus used the gavel to restore order. We're filing a criminal complaint with the police tonight. The investigation is ongoing, and we'll be working with law enforcement to recover as much of the stolen funds as possible. In the meantime, all of Wendy Klein's access to HOA accounts has been terminated. Patricia will take over all financial responsibilities immediately, and we're going to implement new oversight procedures to make sure nothing like this ever happens again. Someone in the back raised their hand. What about the lawsuit against Xavier? Wendy's attorney withdrew from the case this afternoon, and we expect the lawsuit to be formally dismissed within days. The HOA is also considering a countersuit to recover legal fees and damages. Another hand went up. Is Xavier going to sue the HOA? Everyone turned to look at me. I stood up slowly. No, this wasn't the HOA's fault. This was one person abusing her position. The board did the right thing once they knew what was happening. I'm grateful for their support, and I'm looking forward to putting this whole mess behind us. The applause started slow, then built until the whole room was clapping. I felt my face get hot, embarrassed by the attention but also touched by the support. Over the next few weeks, the full scope of Wendy Klein's crimes became clear. The forensic audit revealed she had stolen nearly $75,000 from the HOA over 3 months. She had also been taking kickbacks from contractors she had hired for community work, inflating invoices and pocketing the difference. In total, the fraud exceeded $100,000. The charges kept piling up: embezzlement, fraud, theft, criminal mischief, trespassing, and filing a false police report. She had apparently tried to claim someone else had vandalized my truck, using her credit card to buy spray paint. But the security footage and her own financial records proved otherwise. Her attorney tried to negotiate a plea deal, but the district attorney wasn't interested. With the amount of money involved and the deliberate nature of the crimes, they were pushing for serious prison time. The lawsuit against me was formally dismissed with prejudice, meaning she couldn't refile it. The HOA's insurance covered all legal fees, so I was out exactly $0 on that front. My truck got repainted at state expense, and I installed better security cameras at my house. Several neighbors also upgraded their security systems, and there was talk of installing community cameras at the neighborhood entrances. The trial took place in June, after the snow season had ended. I had to testify about the harassment and the vandalism. It was uncomfortable being in the same courtroom as Wendy Klein, watching her sit at the defendant's table in an orange jumpsuit, but I told the truth about what had happened. The prosecution built a compelling case. They had the security footage, the financial records, the spray paint can with her fingerprints, and testimony from multiple neighbors about her increasingly erratic behavior. Her defense attorney tried to argue that she had been under extreme emotional stress from her divorce, but the judge wasn't sympathetic. Mrs. Klein held a position of trust within her community. The judge said during sentencing, "She abused that trust systematically and deliberately over a period of months. She stole from her neighbors. She harassed a man who was performing essential work for public safety. She vandalized his property and then attempted to sue him for damages. These are not the actions of someone experiencing temporary emotional distress. These are the calculated actions of someone who believed she was above the law." Wendy Klein was sentenced to 4 years in prison and ordered to pay full restitution to the HOA plus additional damages to me for the vandalism and legal stress. The judge also imposed a permanent ban on her serving in any HOA leadership position anywhere in Colorado. As I walked out of the courthouse that day, the reporter who had covered the initial story caught up with me. "Xavier, how do you feel about the sentence?" "I feel like justice was served. I never wanted any of this. I just wanted to park my truck in my driveway and do my job." but she made choices that hurt a lot of people, and now she's facing the consequences. What's next for you and your community? Healing, I guess. The new HOA board is doing a good job. They've reformed a lot of the policies, made things more transparent. We're actually functioning like a community now instead of living under a dictatorship. And I'm still doing what I've always done, keeping the roads clear when it snows. Any message for other people dealing with difficult HOA situations? Document everything. Know your rights. Don't be afraid to stand up for yourself. And remember that most people are reasonable. It's usually just one or two bad actors making everyone else miserable. Once you deal with them, things get better. The story got picked up by national news outlets. I did a few more interviews, always making the same points about reasonable HOA governance and protecting essential workers. The state representative who had reached out to me actually drafted legislation called the Essential Workers Housing Protection Act, which provided explicit protections for first responders and critical infrastructure workers against HOA vehicle restrictions. It passed the following year. Life slowly returned to normal. I kept driving Snowplow through that following winter and every winter since. My truck sits in my driveway every night without issue. The new HOA board, with Marcus as president and Patricia as vice president, runs things efficiently and fairly. They actually survey residents before making major policy changes. Imagine that. I got to know my neighbors better through the whole ordeal. People I had waved to for years became actual friends. We started having neighborhood barbecues in the summer and group snow shoveling parties when big storms hit. The community became a real community, not just a collection of houses governed by arbitrary rules. The HOA recovered most of the stolen money through the restitution payments and the sale of Wendy's house. They used some of it to upgrade community facilities and reduce everyone's HOA fees for a year. They also set up an emergency fund for residents facing financial hardship, which seemed like a fitting use for money that had been stolen from the community. I heard through the grapevine that Wendy's husband, who had left her before all this started, made a statement during the divorce proceedings that her controlling behavior and financial irregularities were part of why he had left. Apparently, she had been exhibiting these patterns at home long before she took over the HOA. The HOA presidency had just given her a bigger stage and more power to abuse. It made me sad in a way, thinking about how someone could go so wrong. But then, I remembered standing in my driveway exhausted from working all night, finding that first citation, and all the stress and harassment that followed. She had made choices. She could have been reasonable. She could have worked with me to find a solution. Instead, she had chosen to abuse her power, and ultimately, she had destroyed her own life in the process. One snowy night the following December, I was out on I-70 around 2 a.m., pushing through a particularly heavy storm. My phone rang with a call from Marcus. "Hey man, just wanted to let you know there's a tree down on Pine Valley Road near your house. Power's out for about half the block. I've got a generator you can borrow if you need it when you get home." "Thanks, Marcus. I should be home by 6 or 7. I'll let you know." "No problem." "Hey, Xavier." "Yeah. I'm really glad you stood up to Wendy. If you hadn't, who knows how much money she would have stolen or how many other people she would have made miserable. You did a good thing." "I just wanted to park my truck in my driveway, man." Marcus laughed. Sometimes the biggest changes start with the smallest stands. Drive safe out there. I hung up and continued plowing, the big blade pushing snow off the highway, my lights cutting through the darkness. Behind me, the road was clear and safe. Ahead of me, more snow was falling, more road to clear, more work to do. It was a good life. An honest life. And I could go home at the end of my shift and park my truck in my own driveway without some petty tyrant trying to make my life miserable. That was all I had ever wanted, and it turned out that was worth fighting for. The seasons cycled on. Winter gave way to spring, spring to summer, summer to fall, and fall back to winter again. Each snowfall brought me back out to the highways, doing the work I had always done. The work that mattered. And every single time I pulled into my driveway at the end of a long shift, I felt a small moment of satisfaction. Not because I had won some battle, but because the battle should never have been necessary in the first place. Common sense had prevailed. Fairness had prevailed. The community had come together and fixed something that was broken. That was the real victory, not the arrest or the trial or the sentence. The real victory was proving that ordinary people standing up for what was right could overcome petty tyranny and restore sanity to their community. My truck still sits in my driveway. The HOA still functions. The roads still get plowed. Life goes on as it should, without unnecessary drama or conflict. And somewhere, in a prison outside Denver, Wendy Klein has a lot of time to think about the choices she made and the power she abused. I don't take pleasure in that. I don't think about her much at all anymore. I think about clear roads and safe travel. I think about my neighbors who became friends. I think about coming home after a long shift and sleeping in my own bed without worrying about citations or harassment or lawsuits. I think about how one person standing up for themselves can protect an entire community from someone who saw power as a weapon rather than a responsibility. The snow keeps falling. I keep plowing. The work continues, essential and unglamorous and necessary. And my truck stays exactly where it belongs in my driveway, ready to roll when the next storm hits. That is how it should be, and that is how it will stay.